In the unforgiving world of professional boxing, respect isn't something handed out freely. It's not earned through social media bravado, clever interviews, or the perception of talent. Respect is forged the hard way, through battles waged in the ring, scars that never fade, and nights when pain and persistence are the only companions left standing. Boxing humbles the arrogant, punishes the careless, and exalts only those who endure. This is the story of what happens when a proud champion underestimates a fighter whose greatness is not defined by fame or fanfare, but by cold, ruthless excellence. It's the story of Stephen "Coolboy" Steph Fulton, a man who dared to question the legitimacy of a modern legend, only to face a brutal lesson at the hands of Naoya Inoue, the fighter the world would come to know simply as the Monster. Stephen Fulton had carved out his place in the sport the old-fashioned way. Born and bred in Philadelphia, a city with boxing culture woven deep into its streets, Fulton emerged from a background of hard sparring, grueling gym wars, and lessons learned through fire. His rise through the super bantamweight ranks wasn't a fluke or a marketing campaign. It was the product of discipline, intelligence, and undeniable skill. Inside the ring, Fulton's game was built on slick movement and defensive sharpness. He had a natural ability to glide just out of range, to frustrate opponents with his timing, and to pick them apart with clean, efficient counters. The boxing world took notice as he amassed victories, capturing world titles and building a resume that suggested the arrival of one of America's next great technicians. But with success often comes a creeping edge of overconfidence. Fulton, who had long been praised for his calm demeanor and ring IQ, began to carry himself with the kind of swagger that makes headlines before a big fight. So when his showdown with Naoya Inoue was announced, the confidence spilled over into outright dismissal. Inoue, by then, was already widely regarded as one of the sport's most dangerous fighters. His reputation wasn't built on words but on actions. Champions from multiple weight classes had stood in front of him, believing they could withstand his power, only to leave the ring battered and broken, often within a few brutal rounds. But to Fulton, the hype around Inoue seemed misplaced. In a moment that would later seem almost prophetic, he voiced his thoughts plainly. The hype is around him because he's Japanese. That's the only reason, Fulton told reporters, his voice steady with conviction. He's not better than me, I'm smarter. Power doesn't win fights, skills pay the bills. Floyd proved that. With that statement, Fulton didn't just question Inoue's resume, he disrespected it. He reduced the Japanese phenom to a product of clever matchmaking and nationalistic fervor, overlooking the raw facts that had become painfully clear to dear others. Inoue wasn't just another knockout artist inflating his record. He was a calculated, disciplined destroyer whose nickname, the Monster, was no mere marketing ploy. Long before Fulton's name was etched onto the bout contract, Inoue had built a career annihilating world-class opposition in 3 different weight divisions. He did so with a unique combination of surgical precision, perfect timing, and power that didn't fade from round to round. It grew sharper. For Inoue, moving up the weight ladder wasn't about chasing belts. It was about cleaning out divisions, with a merciless efficiency that left fans, fighters, and pundits struggling to find his ceiling. By the time the Fulton fight was announced, Inoue was coming off his historic unification at bantamweight, where he had dismantled every belt holder in sight. Still, the narrative persisted that the step up to super bantamweight would be different. He was moving into a division of taller, longer, and physically stronger fighters, and Fulton stood at the top of that mountain. The American wasn't just another contender, he was a master of distance, a fighter whose defensive craft and ring generalship could, on paper, expose Inoue's perceived limitations, and Fulton wasn't shy about fueling that belief. In pre-fight interviews, his words walked the line between self-belief and outright dismissal of his opponent's prowess. Inoue, for his part, said little. His focus, as always, was directed entirely toward preparation, but the road to the ring is rarely smooth. A training injury forced Inoue to postpone the original date of the bout, giving critics and fans more time to wonder. Would the delay dull the Monster's edge? Would ring rust take away his rhythm, timing, and sharpness? If Fulton believed in signs, this would have felt like an omen in his favor. But some stories are written long before the opening bell. When the new date finally arrived, the boxing world's attention shifted to Tokyo. The Ariake Arena pulsed with anticipation. This was more than just another title fight. It was a cultural event. Japan had turned out in force to watch their champion, while the boxing community worldwide tuned in to witness whether Inoue's reign of terror would finally meet resistance. Fulton entered the arena as if he belonged. His body language oozed confidence. His face showed no trace of the doubts that would soon consume him. The stare down, the whispers exchanged at the final face-off, all signaled a man fully convinced of his own superiority. But Inoue's expression told a different story. He didn't flinch. He didn't entertain the mind games. He stood still, his gaze as steady as it had been in every bout before, betraying none of the storm that was about to unfold. The opening bell wasn't the start of a war. It was the start of a lesson. From the very first exchange, the reality of the fight became clear. Fulton, the man so many believed would dictate the pace and control the range, was the one reacting, while Inoue calmly assumed the role of the predator. The Japanese superstar didn't explode forward with reckless aggression. He didn't force the action out of emotion. Instead, he measured, studied, and adjusted with the quiet patience of a seasoned hunter. Fulton, used to dictating the flow against other world-class opponents, now found himself second-guessing his every move. Each jab from Inoue wasn't just a scoring shot, it was a disruption. His punches snapped with a crispness that stole away Fulton's rhythm before it could ever begin. The American's defensive shell, usually so impenetrable, began to crack under the sustained, calculated pressure. For all the talk of power versus skill, what played out in the ring wasn't brute force against finesse. It was ring intelligence versus overconfidence. Inoue's timing nullified Fulton's reach. His footwork closed the gap in ways that seemed almost unfair, cutting off the ring with the ease of a man solving a puzzle he'd already seen 100 times. The longer the fight went, the more one-sided it became. Fulton wasn't getting overwhelmed by volume, nor was he drowning in reckless exchanges. He was simply being outthought, out-timed, and outmaneuvered. The difference between the two fighters became more visible with every round. The precision of Inoue's punches, the economy of his movements, the cold detachment in his expression. This wasn't a fighter hoping for a knockout. This was a master craftsman, taking apart his opponent piece by piece. The bravado Fulton had carried into the ring began to erode. His feet slowed, his guard sagged. The snap that had once defined his counters was gone. Every attempt to mount an offensive response was met with punishment. Inoue anticipated each adjustment, each angle, and answered with precision that made any resistance feel futile. Perhaps the most chilling part of Inoue's performance was the absence of emotion. The insults, the dismissals, the questions about his legitimacy, none of it seemed to matter in the ring. His face never changed, his demeanor never wavered. There was no need for taunts, no need to seek revenge. The fists did all the talking, and then came the inevitable. Fulton's body, worn down by the accumulation of sharp surgical blows, finally betrayed him. His legs, once his greatest asset, no longer obeyed. His defenses, once airtight, fell apart. His heart, still brave, could do nothing to stop the physical reality closing in around him. The end came not with one punch, but with an entire night's worth of domination, crashing down all at once. The referee, seeing what the world could already feel, stepped in. Not to end a contest, but to rescue a fighter whose pride had already been left on the canvas. When it was over, there were no defiant gestures from Fulton, no grand statements of protest. Silence had replaced the bravado. The same man who had questioned Inoue's greatness now stood as living proof of it. And as always, Inoue carried himself with grace. No excessive celebration, no mockery, no need to gloat. His performance had said everything that needed to be said. In the days and weeks that followed, the boxing world replayed the fight, not out of shock, but out of admiration. The questions surrounding Inoue's move to super bantamweight had been answered with ruthless clarity. Not only could he compete at the new weight, he could dominate it, just as he had at bantamweight and super flyweight before. His victory over Fulton sent waves beyond the division. Fighters at 126 pounds began to reconsider their ambitions. Matchmakers started calculating the risks differently. And fans, even those who had doubted him, could no longer deny the truth. Naoya Inoue wasn't just great, he was historic. For Fulton, the loss marked the kind of moment every fighter dreads, the night where the hype, the belief, and the confidence all collapse under the weight of reality. But to his credit, he didn't disappear. Months later, he returned to the ring, and in a testament to his character, he climbed the ladder once again, capturing the WBC featherweight title by outpointing Brandon Figueroa. But no matter how many belts Fulton collects in the future, one chapter will always stand alone in his career. The night in Tokyo, the night he walked into the lion's den, defiant and unafraid, only to emerge humbled and beaten by a fighter whose greatness he had refused to acknowledge. As for Inoue, the march of destruction didn't pause for long. In a fitting sequel to his demolition of Fulton, he would go on to face Marlon Tapales, the remaining piece in his quest for super bantamweight unification. The result was predictable: another masterclass, another stoppage, another title. By the end of 2023, there was no longer any debate about Inoue's place in the sport. He wasn't simply the best fighter in Japan. He wasn't just a pound-for-pound contender. He was, for many, the best boxer on the planet. For those who still hesitated to grant him that title, the question hung in the air, sharp and unavoidable. If Naoya Inoue isn't the best boxer in the world, then who is?